Today's guest is the founder of Iceotope. He started his journey with a company called Iceotope. It was a liquid cooling system for data centers all the way back in 2005, 2006. The company to date has raised over $73 million in funding. He's on the board and he's the chairman of multiple amazing startups in the UK. He's also been an advisor to NASA, and now he's building a venture community. So without further ado, Peter, welcome to the Builders and Funders Show.
Thank you very much, Bert. Wonderful to be here.
I want to start by, as I mentioned, going back all the way to the very start of your startup journey, Isotope. Tell me about how old were you when you found it, and how did you even come up with the idea? How does one say, you know what, I want to build a liquid cooling system for data centers?
I'd actually started another company earlier, and a bit like you, I was quite a young entrepreneur. I was making computers when I was in my early teens, really early teens, like 13. I loved computers, and I loved making them. I loved troubleshooting them. I loved the problems that you'd get in computer systems. And I went to university, and then I started my computer company again out of university. While I was at university, by the way, I ran a bar, and I had a lot of fun running a bar whilst being a student. So I've always had that kind of entrepreneurial gene. And then coming out of university, starting an IT services company, I was looking for something that really differentiated us, and we were quite into energy efficiency. So we drove a series of products around reducing power consumption, reducing carbon footprint, and we looked at creating energy efficiency management software that used webcams to determine if a user was present. Now, this was like way back in '05, right? And now, of course, it's quite commonplace. We actually filed the patent on that way back in '05, but one year we didn't renew it. And that becomes kind of terminal. We did some work on power supply tech, and we did some work on liquid cooling tech. And we were really, really interested in what liquid cooling could do for data centers, for servers, but also further on to increasing performance as much as improving energy efficiency. So Isotope originally was a spin out from that IT services company, which is called Very PC, and Very PC still exists today. They turn over about 30 million, and their specialism is like short run, fully customized systems for like full branding. Schools love them because they get computers in the school colors that are very, very hard to steal. And they strap them to the back of the monitors or bolt them to the desks. And then Isotope, a big part of that motivation was what can we do to change the data center industry? Now, everyone thinks of AI as something new, but back then in '05, there was this big thing going on with AI in financial institutions making trading decisions. And all of the banks are building out massive computing systems to fight against each other. I refer to this as the first AI war, by the way, and it's the war between the banks. And well, everybody knows in '07, '08 there were some big losers in that war, right? And a global financial crisis came about because of that. There were some big winners too, right? So Isotope in those early days created as a spin out from Very PC, raised some VC, and the first customers that were testing the system were banks, were bankers, and they were testing them in very confidential circumstances to run these algorithms to fight with other banks.
So we kind of brushed over the founder story, but let me take you all the way back to 2006. Imagine this: we're in 2006. I'm barely born yet, and you are running Very PC. You're out of college. You're still in your 20s, and you get this idea. You're building these different products. You get the idea for Isotope. hardware is like building hardware is one of those things where a lot of VCs, kind of advise against it. They don't fund it. Now it's kind of becoming popular again, but it's obviously a difficult thing to do. Like you have to build the thing, then you have to make it on like a massive scale, and then you have to go out there and sell it. Like, tell me about how did you even build this thing? I mean, you're not like you're running an IT services company, but how do you figure out how do you like build this thing? Then how do you start selling to the banks?
So very PC at the time was actually kind of hardware-y. It was a lot of it like how do we do how do we hack and make it together better systems. And we had people that were pressing metal for us locally. We were getting a few rudimentary circuit boards custom made for like control architectures and panels for buttons and things like this. So we weren't alien to hardware, and there wasn't such thing back then, I think, as a hacker space, at least not in the UK. But we effectively had a hacker space in that's what our organization kind of was, a just in time customized hardware outfit with a services arm. And so but the first prototype of Isotope was something to behold. Or the first prototypes, I think we had about four or so different things that we were just messing about with. Became a bit of a hobby, and it was all about minimum viable prototype, I suppose you could say. Using as much existing equipment as possible, and then wrapping stuff around it. And I remember taking this thing down to the patent attorneys in like this plastic box with like different pipes and tubes coming in and out of it, and peltiers and refrigerants and all sorts of stuff. Like it was, he put it on the desk and he kind of had a laugh, and then I took him through it. And then like turning that into productization, that was when the VC cash came in, right? Because we got to minimum viable prototype, we could show that this concept worked, and then we could then look at bringing in product designers and electronics designers of some note to do some cool stuff with it and make some products that we could take and these banks would then be happy playing with. Yeah.
Tell me about those early fundraising efforts. Like now you've got this prototype, and now like if we bring in a few people and we can really like this thing can skyrocket, it could become the next big thing. We can build some massive. Tell me about those early efforts trying to fundraise and talk to VCs.
Back then, at pre-seed in Sheffield, England, you probably had like two VCs. Luckily, the first one I walked into got it. Right? And gave us a term sheet. That that was it. Actually, no, I tell a lie. It was the second we walked into. I was just thinking that probably was the first, and the kind of was. The first was an angel group we walked into, and the angel group didn't want to do it, but the VC did. And I stay in touch with the guys today. One's called Mark Rahn, and the other's called Ed French.
hmm And to the extent you can reveal, what happened in 2011? Like the company almost goes bankrupt. Things are not going very well. What happened there?
Well, there are competing stories on it, but basically, now I'm still running very PC. I'm a non-exec of this spin out, and the the VC has brought in a new chief executive, and he's a bigwig, and he's in from the States, and like he was top up there in companies like Intel, and um, they're falling out with this guy. They're not in a happy position. They've agreed some things with him. He thinks that they've agreed something different to what they think they've agreed, and um, that they fall out, and they fall out to such an extent that there's a claim on the company that's so significant around intellectual property and so on from this guy who was going to be the chief exec, um, that they had to wind the company up, and they had to put it into administration. And so I had a very short period of time to raise a lot of money, raise about £1 million, which at the time was about $2 million. in 2 weeks to buy the assets out of administration, off the receivers, and managed to do that successfully somehow. And then we very, very quickly took these rudimentary prototypes that the banks were playing with, and we turned them into a productization that we thought could address the market. We completed the transaction in December 2011, and by March 2012, we had a launch going on at CeBIT of this completely new product, nothing like it before. And like most things like this, a lot of the stuff there was glamour, but there was something actually behind it working, which is kind of cool. And there were some amazing engineers who helped with that sprint, and it was a sprint. Because not only did we have to make the product, but we also had to make the trade stand and get to CeBIT. And we made this this trailer for a big pickup truck, right? And we took this pickup truck and this trailer over to CeBIT in Germany, and we drove it on the ferry from England to Germany. And this trailer like folded down, and there was like the cabinet of Iceotope in the middle, and like smoke and we had to come up with like an explanation as to why we had case studies that were censored, that we couldn't actually put the banks on the case studies. So we decided to spin it that this was a declassified military endeavor. And so we're like, we got this black SUV, this black trailer. We all like got black jackets, and we got the smoke, and we printed the case studies redacted, and then we put them in like Manila envelopes, Manila like folders, and we stamped on them redacted, declassified. And like everyone was coming over and studying it. It was an interesting move. It really drew a crowd to do this. Funny thing was at CeBIT, we were like right near the Russians, and we kept tending up all these Russians coming over with all these KGB minders, looking at all our stuff. It was really funny. It's really fun.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but around 2011 was also when you had the ski accidents, right? Kind of those near-death experiences.
That was later on. That was a few years later, and I was skiing in Tahoe, and I skied off a cliff at 49.8 miles an hour. Why do I know it's 49.8? Well, ski tracks was invented then, and it was 49.8 miles an hour. And after that, I ended up in hospital for several weeks, multiple operations in the US, medevaced home to the UK, about $250,000 of medical bills from the US. I had insurance though, so that was kind of handy. And then in the UK, bedbound for a while, then into a wheelchair, then more operations, a few kind of near death moments. I think I look back and I think there were at least 3, perhaps 4 periods of time where I had greater than 30% chance of death from something, whether it was like blood clots to my lungs from the injury, or follow-up infection, MRSA, this kind of stuff. And it was just, hit or miss. And I kind of look at COVID. COVID, everybody's world got smaller, and their world went down to their house. Well, my world got so small at one point it was a bed, but it was the same feeling. And when my world started to get bigger again, and I'm like on this second life, I've kind of rededicated my position, not around my startup or my thing, but about giving others their shot. And one of the reasons I've set up Ampere Ventures was to give others their shot at being founders, fixing often things that are a bit broken. And then Venture.Community was about bringing together people like Ampere Ventures, but also advisors, specialists, portfolio like CFO, CTO, people like this, but also founders, bringing everybody together in a mutual organization. So Venture.Community is a mutual or a cooperative of advisors and founders working together to help them build their company. It's
I want to go back to two of the experiences we talked about. So the year's 2011, and the thing that is your baby, your company is going to bankruptcy, and then a few years later, you've got the skiing accident. You're about to, like you're almost dead. Like you've faced death. You've seen the angel. It's almost gotten you. I want to ask about. Often people don't get into the emotional side of things. They kind of just brush off. They're like, oh yeah, this happened, then I recovered. But I'm sure in both of those moments, and many more in your career, you've just. I mean, I'm sure it was a very emotional journey in both cases and many other cases. I had Jeff Ralston on the podcast not too long ago. He was the former president of Y Combinator. And I asked him. I said, in your toughest moments, what are you thinking? What are you telling yourself? How the hell are you getting through these really tough times? And he says one of the mental frames he's got. I want to ask you the same question. What were you telling yourself? You're about to die or your baby's going bankrupt. Like, what are you telling yourself? What are you doing at the moment to stay sane?
interesting, isn't it? But I actually think there's this moment where the fog clears. So, like, if maybe I describe it in a different way. Like, you're not the driver of your car, right? If you are a car, you got a monkey that's driving your car, right? An emotional creature is driving your car. Yeah, we are emotional creatures with thoughts, not thinking creatures with emotions. So you're like the passenger in a car, and there's a monkey driving. Um, there kind of becomes a point where the monkey's like completely lost its crap, and you've picked it up and you've thrown it into the back seat, and you're driving the car. There's this point at which going gets so tough that the fog just clears, and you get absolute clarity, but you've emotionally detached. And that's the point you really start to get recovery and get stuff done. And I kind of like, you know, talk about, um, so I talk about my experience of dealing with tough times and tough emotional stuff as normal. Things are getting emotional, angry, emotional. Now, like, and then suddenly no emotion whatsoever. It's just about, you know, picking up, getting stuff done, and entering battle mode. Yeah, um, and generally I win when that happens. Up until that point, I'll be a bit grumpy, and if people respond to that, then we're doing good. Otherwise, if I get into battle mode and I emotionally detach, you know, then it's like, right, we're just gonna get stuff done. Does that make
Ah,
sense? Does anybody else explain it like that? Do you feel that's the same for you?
it kind of reminds me of I kind of always into professional fighting. I've been boxing since like 15, and there's this interesting thing with fighters where when they get into the cage or they get into the ring, I think I'm gonna mispronounce it. However you pronounce it, it kind of when they start feeling it, they forget everything, and it kind of become like they walk in, they've got fear, and then everything just kind of disappears, like you said. Or it kind of seems to be the same with soldiers as well, where as soon as they're in the trenches, the war is happening, the hormones take over, and they've kind of forgotten they're all like in, and that's kind of interesting because like you mentioned accidents. I think I was reading this somewhere, but like a lot of people who get into car accidents, they don't feel their injuries for a bit because their body is just it's got the adrenaline. I can't pronounce it, but it's got that hormone where it's like they can't feel it. That's why after a few days it starts to appear, and they're like, "Oh shoot, I've got like herniated discs or something." But like they didn't feel at the moment. They didn't feel anything because like their body was just in that mode. So I guess maybe you could extrapolate that out, and you could apply that to those scenarios as well. I get like it's that kind of
Yeah,
psychology factor.
it's the same. It's the same feeling. It's the same, like, you've put the monkey in the back seat and you're driving the car by reaching over. It's very unhealthy to do it for a long point of time, but it's what happens. It's what happens when the emotions get high and when the going gets tough. And some people in that mode run. Some people break down. Some people face down the danger and fight. And it's the same in the ring, in war, in business, in those tough moments. Which one are you going to be? Um, and some people get physically violent as well, but I don't. I don't. So it's interesting. Um, and so tough times, getting stuff done. Just there's that clarity that comes over the situation. And then so I'm kind of good in the firefight and helping entrepreneurs through difficult times.
hmm So let me ask you this. With the benefit of hindsight, you're looking back on the journey of 18, 19, 20 years, and you're looking at building Isotope, you're looking at all the experiences you've had. What would you have done differently? Whether it's picking VCs, picking partners, dealing with investors, or just literally anything. Do you have any regrets? What would you have changed? What would you have done differently if you could?
So one of the things I'm going to talk about here a little bit is alcohol. Now, I'm in the UK. We have quite an alcoholism culture. I never considered that I had an issue, and I still don't particularly consider that I had an issue. But when you're in a culture where you've got alcohol and you've got that like founder personality type, uh, you're not your best when you're drinking it, and you're not your best the next day when you're recovering from drinking it. And one reflection I have is if I had have drunk alcohol only when I was on holiday or on very rare occasions, I probably would have enjoyed it more and I would have been a lot more productive. And I would have been a lot more successful. And so, in terms of how I progress forwards, like that's a big thing for me. I think the other thing is we're a lot better at understanding neurodiversity and neurodivergent approaches, and lots of founders are neurodivergent, and like nootropics, biohacking, and how to approach this better. And that's been revolutionary for me. It's doubled my productivity. So if I was to do things differently to be able to take back some of those things around looking after myself better and getting the most out of myself, and that's really powerful.
Oh, I might be misunderstanding. The first point, drink a little bit more alcohol,
Drink
or
a
am
little
I
less
a little
during
less?
the
Okay.
during during the normal times, and have loads when you're on holiday. Have loads when you're having fun, but like you know, you don't make it part of your day.
The
You know,
second part you
in
mentioned.
British culture, it's very much part of your day. You know.
hmm the second part you mentioned. So, what have you exactly done to have like kind of enhanced your cognitive performance? Like, are you like kind of like supplements wise? Or is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah. So I take dopamine precursors, just amino acids, just vitamins to precursor dopamine, L-tyrosine, L-theanine, and phosphatidylserine. The three that I take. They're just nutrients that you'd normally get in your diet that give you the ability to improve your dopamine production. And it's for me, it's really helped in terms of getting productivity throughout the day. It's been really great.
Finish off on this note. Is there any other stories, any lessons you've learned from your journey that you'd like to tell us before we end this?
Um, it's not an easy journey. Too many things are fireside chats. This over polished um, beauty parade of um, oh, it was all wonderful. The reality is it's all grit and grime, hard times, hard work. It's not a fireside chat, and we need to have more fire inside chats. That's one thing that we advocate is we talk about the fire inside chat, the chats you're going to have behind closed doors, around the grit and the grime of the journey, and it's okay. It's okay.